righty. I'm going to call this meeting to order. It's 10:14. Just a roll call, obviously. Cindy, myself, and Chris are here. I want to introduce Chris. She's new to the personnel board. And Chris, I'll just let you, if you want to, just give a little background about your experience in HR.
Sure. So I started out in HR without knowing I was starting out in HR, which is probably how most HR people get their start. I spent a little time as a probation officer and working in private probation. And right now I work for Nestle Purina as the factory HR manager in St. Joseph.
Very good. So the first item, we do have a quorum with 3 out of 5 of us here. So we can actually make a motion to approve the meeting minutes. I'll make that motion if I can get a second.
I second that.
Very good. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Meeting minutes pass as written. Okay, now old business is the drug and alcohol policy. And I'm going to turn it over to Mike and Carissa, who are going to walk us through a little of the history and then where we are and where we're going with it.
Thank you. So it's been a journey, to say the least, the last 4 or 5 months, looking through our very outdated need for updating drug policy. So we started this back in July-ish, somewhere around early July, mid-July. We're going down the path of trying to make sure this picks me up. We're going down the path of trying to find a way to get in line with what the state allows as it pertains to THC and marijuana use. After a few weeks, we decided, let's take a step back. Let's talk with the city manager's office to make sure we are going the right direction, the direction that they want us to go. They said, hold on for a little bit, pump the brakes. Let's look into this a little bit deeper. So we contacted an outside attorney that we have on contract, on retainer, to discuss it a little bit. He advised us, first step, remove the pre-screening testing for THC. He said, you can have it, you're fine to have it in your policy to not allow it at this point. We can explore that later on. But at this point, remove it from the pre-screening. You can't require somebody it's allowed in the state if they used it the week before and then applied for a job. They're not under your policy. So we had, rather than come back to this group, we had the city manager sign off on an administrative policy that removes the pre-screening THC testing. We intend to roll that into the updated policy when we bring that to you all here, hopefully in the next 3 months. But for now, that's an administrative policy that will essentially supersede that little temporary section. The next step, let me back up here. So the next step was to sit down with the city manager's office, our city attorney, Mike Veet with the firefighters union. He's been really vested in this and done a lot of research, so he's very interested party, and in HR. So we talked about it a few times, the different angles we wanted to come from, and ultimately what we decided was to set up a meeting with a man named John Throckmorton. He is with a company called Tomo Drug Testing out of Springfield, widely considered in Missouri municipal circles as one of the experts when it comes to THC testing, THC allowance in municipal governments. So we met with him a few weeks ago. I'll kind of share the takeaways what I got out of that. I believe Chris's takeaways are similar to that, but chime in, please, if you hear something that I'm not on par with. So essentially, he said there's no legal or generally agreed upon level to show impairment. So there's really nothing currently to say what this number, let's just say 5 parts per million, is the level that shows impairment. Similar to, the standard is the 0.08 for alcohol. That's the level that's official. That's the level that's legal. That's the medical level that says impairment if you're over that amount. So we understood that, but it was nice to hear that from an expert that that's what we were thinking as well. Every number that you hear that's tossed around at this point are opinions. There's not enough science that's been done yet. So additionally, to piggyback on that, there's no case law that's really been set. There's just been very little case law done up to this point. The next thing he said, well, it's a extreme liability for the city to go out on this limb, especially when it relates to public safety and safety sensitive. Excuse me, public safety is part of that, but safety sensitive is a larger group. So that was interesting to hear, which we kind of figured, but another item he touched on was, as far as he knows, Kansas City, Missouri is the only municipal government in the state of Missouri that allows it currently, that actually has policies in place to allow the use of THC. Not on the clock, of course, but to use it recreationally when you're not working. Another item he advised us to look into was, currently we have our contractors test doing through urine, sending that off for testing. He said you might want to look at using the mouth swab. Reason for that is it takes a couple of hours to show up in your urine. So if you had just recently used marijuana or THC, half an hour, 45 minutes, hour before, and then you got behind a wheel, then you went in for testing after you got in an accident, let's say, there's a good chance that it wouldn't show up unless it was in the urine. So he said it's a little bit more, it's not any more accurate, it's just more sensitive early on. So we're definitely going to be exploring that here in the near future. Carissa has already checked with our providers, and they do offer that as an option. So another key point he touched on was prescription marijuana. We asked about that. He said and advised that prescription marijuana is actually not prescribed. It's a recommendation. So in the quote unquote prescription, in the recommendation that you get from a doctor, unlike normal prescriptions, let's say for codeine, it'll say use twice a day, 3 times a day. Here's the exact amount. It's 50 milligrams or whatever that might be. With the THC, it just says essentially, here, go get some THC, you can use marijuana. So not limiting or restricting the potency or the frequency of use, which is obviously could be a major problem. To jump on back of that, he kind of painted a picture for us. He said, think of back in the 60s and 70s when folks would walk around smoking joints, let's say, and smoking marijuana. He said usually that was around 1 or 2% marijuana, or THC, I'm sorry, 1 or 2% concentration of THC. He said now you can buy stuff over the counter legally that goes all the way up to 85%. And this higher level won't necessarily stick in your system longer. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. It all depends on your physiology. But the bigger concern is that later on down the line, it can cause psychedelic issues, hallucinations, days, weeks later, depending on the person and how they process it. So that's a concern, clearly, with the concentration and potency of the THC. So one of the pieces of advice he gave us, and we're definitely going to pursue this, is identifying our safety sensitive and non-safety sensitive. So as I said earlier, the public safety folks would clearly be safety sensitive, but you have street maintenance workers that are also out in dump trucks driving around. You have the sanitary sewer workers. You have the water folks that are in heavy equipment out there. Those are considered in our eyes safety sensitive as well. An example of the non-safety sensitive would be human resources, probably. Folks that sit in office most of the day and don't operate heavy machinery or get behind a city vehicle. So we're going to identify those two groups, and he recommended developing policies for each separate. We don't know what that's going to look like yet. We assume there's going to be, when it comes to discipline anyway, that there's going to be varying levels of discipline. We want to be consistent for each group. We understand that each group's going to be different. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like. We are planning on enlisting Mr. Throckmorton. I always want to say Thornton. Throckmorton as assistance. He made it clear that he and his firm, they do not develop policies, but they assist with the development. So we will draft things ourselves, share it with him. So we're going to bring him on board in some capacity to assist us before we come back to this board to provide you with drafts as we go along this process. So that all said, we didn't even touch on the federal guidance or the federal grant portion of it. As we talked before, one of the concerns is because it is not legal in the country by the feds, that if a municipality partakes in this, even though it's allowed by the state, they could lose the risk or forfeit their federal funding. We had an attorney tell us a few months ago that that's an unlikely scenario. It still could happen, so it's something to keep on the radar. But I mean, it's a big thing if we were to lose our federal funding. That's a big source, especially when it comes to some of our infrastructure and some of those grants. So that's aside. That we didn't even discuss that. So that's a major concern. Bottom line, the biggest issue was the liability to the city to allow use of THC. So at this point, we're leaning towards not permitting it. For sure, not for safety sensitive positions. Non-safety sensitive positions, we'll explore that as we move forward. So that's kind of where we're at right now. We hope to have something to this group within the first quarter of 2025. Maybe not at our first meeting in January, but maybe probably around somewhere in February. We have some other items, some low-hanging fruit that we want to discuss as well. So we'll take any questions you guys have right now about the drug, where we're at with drugs.
Anything from the group with questions?
I guess one of my questions would be in coordination with the policy. Is there going to be a plan for implementation and education for those who will be responsible for administrating this policy, for follow-up, things of that nature?
You want to touch on that? Or I can touch on it.
Whoa, that's really loud. Okay. Do I need to bring it closer again? Is this good? Okay. So yes, there would be a rollout phase that would include training and education for frontline managers and supervisors, and then ongoing support from HR as well. So because it would be a broad change from where we are now, we would absolutely want to educate them on the expectations. Right now, we have a very, very lenient policy that literally says it's just up to whoever the manager is to decide how they want to handle it. That's the literal verbiage. So right, I'm not paraphrasing. Yeah. So yeah. So it will have a defined disciplinary process, right? We'll have defined steps that we need to take, who needs to be involved. It's going to encompass reasonable suspicion, which again, we're lacking a strong process and policy for that. So there's going to be enough changes that they're going to need support. And so that'll be something that we'll work on, will be the rollout and the training and education pieces of it, and then the continued support from HR.
And also too, I assume there will be a period of, because THC stays in your system for a period of time, that there will be a, as we're rolling it, there will be a grace period of, I had a gummy on Saturday and then on Monday they told me this policy. And so I assume we would have some time, give them notice that you need to get that out of your system.
Yes, not sure exactly what that'll look like, because it's not going to be a change in direction. It'll be clearer that it's not going to be a change in direction fully. It's not going to be a 180 from where we're at, because currently the city does not allow use of THC. So that won't be a brand new, but for new employees, for sure for new employees, that's going to be an issue, trying to battle through that. But yes, there will be some sort of a grace period. We're not just going to come out and say, start hammering like that. The deal is we're not going to be doing random drug testing anyway. Non-DOT folks, if you have a CDL, that's a different story, of course. There's going to have to be reasonable suspicion, like Carissa had stated. I'll add one thing that Mr. Throckmorton had advised us to do, which, while we're behind a little bit in this, well, we're woefully behind in the current drug policy. Let's be honest. But one thing he had advised us to do is even if it's a little fender bender, to get eyes out there to see if there's any kind of suspicious acting person that was behind the wheel for of the city on the city's behalf. We're already doing that. We actually are stronger than that, I would say, in that any fender bender, if you back into a light pole, you immediately go in to be drug tested. So it's not at that point, it's not reasonable suspicion. That's just covering all of our bases. So we are, we're good in a few areas, not so good in more than a few. So
Well, and that makes sense too, and thinking too about the process of and knowing that Chris is new with us. You're going to bring a document to us, we're going to review it. That's going to take some time. Then once we finally say, yep, all of what we would like to see for wordsmithing is good, then there's always a 10-day notice of the hearing where employees can come in and comment, and then it has to go to the city council for them to make the final decision. So there will be plenty of opportunities to know that this is coming. And just always a reminder too, Chris being new, that we're an advisory board, so we serve at the pleasure of the city council. So if they decide later they want to do something else, then we change course. So, yep. Anything else on the drug policy? All right, very good.
I will add one thing. Sorry. In your packet here, there is there is a copy of the administrative policy that was issued in August from Mr. Walker that advises that we're not going to be doing the pre-screening anymore. So if you just a FYI, there's a copy in there for you.
Very good. All right, we're going to, and then I think we can move on to new business. And I'm going to turn that over to Carissa and Mike to talk about some things going forward that we need to work on that do not relate to drug and alcohol policy.
All right, I'll just touch on it for a few minutes and turn it over to Carissa. So first off, the City of Independence doesn't currently have an employee handbook. I've been here 23 years, and
Yeah.
I mean, two HR professionals looking at each other. So, which doesn't seem strange to me because I've been here for 23 years and not really thought about it. I don't really need to learn anything else because I knew, I've been an employee for a while. And Carissa brought it to my attention a couple of months ago, and she said, "We really need one of these." Okay, I 100% agree. When she starts going through the items that really need to be in the handbook, oh shoot, we really do need one. Makes sense. That's the first part. Second part, and she'll explore that a little bit more here in just a second. We also don't have a code of conduct policy within the city. So we have a section in the policy for disciplinary action, and you can't do X, Y, Z, all these certain things, the usual suspects. However, there's nothing in there about professionalism and integrity, and there is a little bit about conflict of interest, but not a ton. Nothing in there, generally speaking, about dress code, not specifics, but generalizing that you need to act this way. You need to be professional. You need to treat people with kindness. You need to, be respectful to citizens. There's nothing in there. So we decided ultimately where that needs to go, that code of conduct, probably the best spot for that would be in the handbook. We can make reference to it in the personnel policies, specifically in that disciplinary section, that any violation of code of conduct will result potentially in disciplinary action, something along those lines. Ultimately, we'll add that in there, but the living, breathing document itself should exist within the employee handbook. So I'm going to turn it over to Carissa to kind of talk through the different items that we believe we'd like to put in the handbook, and then ultimately bring it back to you all to kind of take a look at.
So I want to ask this question. There really is no employee handbook, ever? Because I'm pretty sure I've seen one.
There was quite some time ago, but it has since not been utilized, and that's at least been for the last 5 years from what I can tell.
So I'm just going to ask this. So when a new employee's hired and they go through orientation,
there is no current orientation. That was stopped a few years back as well, apparently. We were not in place, so I can't speak to the why behind that. We
Oh,
were
I'm not
here-
gonna ask why.
Yeah, okay.
Because I probably don't want to know. But
But there currently is not a standard orientation. There would be like a departmental orientation. So we are working on a new hire orientation as well.
okay, that
Yes.
absolutely.
We're gonna get this foundation
Right.
all set and together and feel much better when we do.
So what, just so I can clarify, when I'm speaking of no employee handbook, I'm speaking of when I started 23 years ago. I don't remember receiving an employee handbook. I haven't been close to the process the last number of years, but I haven't, like Carissa said, it's been at least 5 years. I don't remember ever seeing one from any of my new employees that we've hired, to be honest. Jumping back to the new employee orientation, that's a good point. There has been an employee orientation in the past, and it stopped around 2022, 23. It was, some would say maybe a little too lengthy. We're in the process of redesigning that, rebooting it. We're going to offer employee orientation, an onboarding. We're definitely going to be doing that here in the very near future. We would have liked to have already reinstituted it, but we've had a number of things pop up.
So I'll start with the employee handbook. You guys have a document that is 2 pages. This is still a work in progress, but these are kind of some of the key things, right? So initially start with a welcome message from the city manager, just kind of outlining, what's our vision, what's our mission, what's our whatever as city employees, what are we striving to get to, representing the city. And then employment policies. So obviously equal employment opportunity, career opportunities, communications and media, city communications, discipline process, criminal conduct and background checks, FMLA, ADA, reasonable accommodations, religious accommodations, employment records, employment verification, harassment, discrimination, and retaliation, internal escalation process. So primarily stop it. We will address open door policy further down, but zero tolerance I-9 compliance, non-scheduled closings. So if there's inclement weather and we need to close, what is the process? So employees, new hires understand what that looks like. Open door policy. So if there are concerns or escalations, who they can go to and how that escalation process works. Expense reimbursement, rehire eligibility, reinstatement eligibility, lactation policy, separation of employment.
If you don't mind,
Mm-hmm.
Especially for Chris, a lot of these things are in the personnel policies and procedures now. I didn't know if you were maybe getting the feeling like, oh gosh, we don't have any of that. We do have a lot. Yeah. And also too, I would say that you guys said that we could get out, they're going to email us a PDF of the policies where we are today. And I think that's good. It'll go to the whole board so that we are on the same document from here. Because I can tell you I have probably 10 copies from over the past couple of years. So there is a lot of this written. Obviously, we have FMLA, things like that, lactation. But this would just be that, as you well know, a quick summary of, you're eligible for FMLA if you work blah, blah, whatever. And then, of course, it would refer to the personnel policies and procedures. So we are not lacking in all of this. It's just more bringing it into employee handbook. So my apologies for interrupting.
No, you're good. And that's a good point. As we talk, some of the policies will be new. Some of them, like code of conduct, we truly don't have one. We don't have a timekeeping policy. Yes. So that'll be a new one that gets added. So there are some, but to Laura's point, we do have a lot of these. Some of them need to be reviewed and revised because they just haven't been touched on in some time. So legal language has changed, guidance has changed, that sort of thing. So payroll and work schedule section that has a timekeeping policy, employment classifications, pay and payroll overview, pay distribution, pay periods, pay statements, payroll deductions, payroll garnishments, Okay, transparency, general working hours, general working schedules, because obviously those vary by department, but more of an overall expectation of we expect you to be here and we expect you to work, right? I know. Employment benefits. So we'll go over overall benefits overview and eligibility, bereavement leave, jury duty leave, military leave, PTO holidays, tuition reimbursement, workers' compensation, leave of absence policies. So unpaid leave of absences, restatements from LOA, return to work from LOAs, and then employee responsibilities. So general attendance expectations, confidentiality, general dress code, ID badges, general safety, code of conduct, drug and alcohol, tobacco use, workplace violence, and then workplace technology. So computer use, passwords, cell phones, social media, that sort of thing. And then the next document is truly a draft of the code of conduct. It's not meant for us to necessarily review today and go through, but just to give you an idea, because again, as stated, we don't have one. So right now, if we have somebody who acts in a very unprofessional manner, let's say, we don't have anything that actually addresses our ability to put disciplinary action in place. We focus on insubordination. We focus on, the major discipline tracks, but not necessarily unprofessional conduct.
And it sounds silly to say we can't. I mean,
We can.
but to not to have to go down a different path and find a different area of that's currently in code. Well, they violate this instead of just they were unprofessional. I mean, it saying, well, the supervisor told them not to. If the supervisor didn't tell them not to, then you don't act or unprofessional. It seems kind of silly to have to tell them that. But anyway, sorry. Yeah, frustrates me a little bit.
So that would be really, again, the other piece, obviously. This is a very condensed code of conduct. I really just hit the high kind of level pieces: professionalism, integrity, conflicts of interest, and then responsible use of city resources. We can add obviously more, but I was trying to keep it kind of succinct and to the point that addresses the areas that we have seen concerns arise out of.
And one question too, I believe we talked about that each department may have their code of conduct or something similar, and that you were going to ask the department heads, directors, chief, whatever, to get copies of all that's out there currently, so that one, we can make sure they don't have something in there that maybe they shouldn't, or something that we need to consider for this, but trying to bring it more in line at the top level. And then of course, there may be department differences. So a department head could make a decision, but they have to be as restrictive as this policy is. You know what I mean? They can't become more lenient. You know the phrase I'm trying to use. I'm not getting my words out great, but so they will be pulling those together to look at what's out there and making sure that we're considering all of that.
Yeah, we feel like this is a perfect time to request all of the policies from the various departments to kind of just give it a once over, give an overview. If our citywide policies, administrative policies, and personnel policies haven't been revised in quite some time, there's a good chance that many of the department policies haven't been revised either. That said, just so Chris understands too, we have, I think we talked about this before, but we do have 5 labor unions and seven different CBAs with those unions. So we also want to make sure that those departmental policies don't violate the CBAs. And if they do, we would probably know about it already if they're enforcing the policy. But if the policy is not being enforced, there's no reason to have it in the first place, to be honest. So it needs to be revised or discontinued. So anyway, I'll touch on that.
I have a quick question. So are the departmental policies not being reviewed with the renewal or new CBAs that come along after collective bargaining, or in light of any bargaining that's done, between contracts?
Not directly. They are being reviewed because we will hear quickly if it's violating a department policy or if the department management is enforcing a policy that violates the CBA. Of course, we will hear about that. So indirectly, they kind of check and balance there. There's a kind of a check and balance there. I'm more concerned with the random floating policy that maybe somebody put out in 2012 that technically is still on the books for Department A, but nobody's seen it, nobody's enforced it. I'm afraid one of those might just pop up and they say, "Oh yeah, that's a violation of our policy." That's not really a fun deal to pull a catch-22 on someone if they didn't know it existed. So, not saying that there's many of those out there. Maybe there's zero, which would be great, but we want to go through and just double check. But it is fairly self-regulating when it comes to the CBAs. We will hear really quickly if management is enforcing a policy that violates the CBA, and vice versa. So then again, that kind of self-regulates.
Any other thoughts from anyone? I will just say that I've been on the board, I think 7 years or so now, and I feel like we are doing much better now. We are really addressing the foundational things that I think we feel should have been addressed, maybe decades ago, but we're on it now, and I appreciate Mike and Carissa so much because they're bringing these things to the table, and we're going to get them through. We're going to get them discussed, get them implemented, and then we'll feel stronger that we have a better foundation, I believe, and then can move on and focus on other policy changes and things that need to be made. But I think this is a great thing that we're doing, and I feel very good about the board and our positions on the topic. So just want to thank you guys for that work. It's been a lot. Just the learning about THC and marijuana and all of that takes a lot of time. It's not there's nothing clear cut out there. So I know you guys have worked hard on that. So
I just want to add something. Through this code of conduct, the only thing that, through the code of conduct, the only thing that I might like to see is something in there about safety.
Yeah, safety is departmental.
Yes.
Because safety is departmental and position specific, I did not include safety. We don't currently have a general safety, so I would have to create that.
You don't have okay.
We do not have a general safety.
Okay.
So it is listed for the code. It is listed for the employee handbook to create a separate general safety policy. That policy still needs to have some union specific language in it, right? Like we defer to the unions,
Right,
we defer
for
to
this,
the
right.
department, because each metermen are going to have a different expectation for safety than fire, and then
Correct.
police, and then so to try to keep it from not overstepping any of those bounds, I did not include it. It's absolutely something we can look at if we want to. We would just have to be very careful with general safety.
I would just make the recommendation, make it very broad, because even for office workers, it's really important, like they run an extension cord or they do things, and just be aware that people can trip, people can fall, and it probably could be a liability issue. So maybe something really broad you could put in there.
Okay.
I think, look at it. I would just, that
Okay.
would be my thought.
any other thoughts?
I actually, since there are so many CBAs, and it may never come into play, but when looking at the handbook, a disclaimer that nothing in these policies is meant to keep someone from their collective bargaining rights, under the NLRB statute, all of that good stuff.
Yeah, so there will be that standard language that this doesn't constitute a contract of employment, nor does it supersede any union agreements. Yes.
I figured you thought of
Yeah,
that.
that's okay. That's okay. It never hurts. Yes.
And we're all learning, so
Yeah.
it's fine to ask the questions.
Yeah.
And that's what we're here for. Okay, is there anything else on that topic? Okay, hearing none, we talk about our next scheduled meeting. And I'm going to defer to Mike and Carissa as far as, do you think you'll have something for us to review on the second Tuesday? I have too many boards, you can tell. The second Friday of December, do you think you'll have anything to present to us at that time?
Yeah, we won't on the drug policy yet. Like I said, I think we're looking at February-ish for that, to bring something to the group. But as Chris has stated, specifically the code of conduct policy, we can come back and review that and take a look at it for sure. We may even have a few other things that we can toss in there that's from the handbook, that is from policy that's more of a overview of those policies. So yeah, I think we could definitely come back together in December.
Okay, then I would ask the board and everyone here to, and as I would just ask in general, please block out the second Friday of every month going forward. There was one new thing that I did want to bring up in talking about scheduling. We've talked about if this is a good meeting time, if we wanted to change it. We were waiting to get a full board. We do now have a full board. However, discussing it today without the other two members is not going to get us anywhere. So what I had thought about last night doing is maybe I'll just send out an email with each of you respond to me with your, I cannot do it on these days, and I prefer these days. And then I can try to put together what works. And then, of course, in accordance with the city, because we have to, for instance, have a room where it's recorded and things like that. But I know we wanted to have that discussion. But just in general, please block out the second Fridays until otherwise known. And as far as I know, this room has been booked on all those days, and we will be at 10. And I apologize for the confusion, and it's totally fine. It's totally fine. So just, keep an eye out. If it's not going to be here at 10 a.m., I will try to very much put that in the subject line. Know where you need to be, because it's happened. We've had people down there and here. So we'll work on that.
And I will add this is by far the most convenient for recording. The only other room we have in the city that's set up that way are the council chambers, which, on Friday morning probably can meet in there. A little bit overkill for as many people are in here, but hopefully we can continue to meet here. And when we move to the new building, this will always be a spot that we can meet. But when we move to the new building there off of Little Blue Parkway, will be set up in multiple conference rooms in there to be able to record. So that's not going to be an issue.
Very good. Unless there's any other new business to come before the board, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make that a motion.
I second.
This is how I end my meetings. All in favor, say bye.
Bye.
Thanks all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.